Week 7 in the NFL proved to be rather calm. We'll see what Week 8 has in store for us in Survivor Pools. I, of course, am StatSational here for the Sharp app, and this is Scratchin Survivin, the #1 show for analysis on Survivor Pools you're going to find anywhere. We do it a little bit differently here. So for those of you who have been here before, welcome back. And those of you who are new, welcome to the show. Hopefully you're going to be here for a long time surviving in your pool. All right, so week 7, I mean, you got the Kansas City game, which most people were on. That was never really in doubt. New England, off to a little bit of a shaky start. They wound up winning fairly convincingly. The games that really had people on edge, and they weren't highly picked in most pools, but Denver and Green Bay really gave people a scare there. Denver especially, win it right down to the wire. But for the most part, most of you probably advanced. Again, we had the Thursday night game. That was the one that really tripped people up. That's 3 weeks in a row. We had a favorite go down, a decent size favorite, that is, on Thursday night. So that was the one that cost the most people over in Circa, probably cost the most people in your pool their entries last week. So we'll see. We didn't lose a ton of people over in the Grandissimo, the 100K entry pool. They didn't lose anybody. Almost all, I think 13 or 12 or 13 of 15 were on the Chiefs last week. And you're going to see in a pool like that a few things, right? So take a look at that pool and relate it to your pool. Maybe if you're getting down to the nitty gritty in your pool, you've got 13, 14, 15 people left in your pool, especially in that one. Now, it's going to be a little bit sharper, but you'll see less chances being taken because it's a $100,000 entry fee. Now, regardless of the fee, this kind of drives me nuts in all sorts of sports, but it drives me nuts in the NFL, in all sports. When we're looking at it from a sports betting and risk taking standpoint, to me, there's only one way to play. Well, obviously in survivor pools, there's many different ways to play, but there's a way, there's a proper way, and there's an improper way. And just because I've got $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million bet, that really shouldn't change what the proper way to play. So if I was playing blackjack, I'm not going to stand on 16 against the dealer's 10 just because I'm afraid to bust. And I see people do this all the time where they stand improperly at a blackjack table because the feeling of I'm the one who cost myself the win as opposed to maybe the dealer cost themselves the win, right? And what happens in all risk taking, if you're betting for $1, poker is actually a perfect example of this. If you're not willing in poker to make a call where you are a massive underdog, but the pot odds are dictating the fact that you absolutely need to make that call. I mean, for instance, if you are drawing to a flush, let's say, right, you've got 8 cards in the deck that would make you the flush, or 9 cards, right? 9 cards, you've got 4. You've seen 4 of the of whatever suit it is. There are 9 more left in the deck of that suit. You're down to the river. You've got approximately a 20% chance at that point of hitting your flush. And so that's a 4-1. You're a 4-1 underdog. There's 80% of the time you're going to lose this bet. 20% of the time you're going to win it. Let's say it's the nut flush and there's no pairs on the board and you're guaranteed here to ship the pot. So you've got a 4-1 chance on winning. And you say, well, should I call or should I not call? Well, it's all dependent on not only what's in the pot, but the how much money is going to be put into the pot. So if I'm going to get a return of 5-1 or 6-1 on my bet, and I'm a 4-1 underdog, I have to take that bet each and every time. Now, if you're playing in a $2 game, maybe that's an easy call. Maybe it's a $50 call or something like that, and you're going to make it. You're comfortable making that call. Now you're playing in a 10-20 game, and now it is a, let's say, $500 call. And then you're a little apprehensive about betting $500 on a bet that you're fairly confident is going to lose 80% of the time. Well, then you're playing in the wrong game. You have to be willing to, no matter what the stakes are, to take the bet that makes you money that is plus EV over time. So you may lose that particular bet right now, but if you're in that game for the long haul, every time you make that bet, you're going to be positive over the long term. And that's what we're looking at when we are sports betting, when we're playing poker, any of these things, right? You have to be willing to take that bet. So if you know it yourself, if you play at a $5 pool in Survivor, you're going to be much more apt to maybe take some risks that you wouldn't take if you were playing in a $5,000 entry pool. All right, so just keep that in mind. And as far as I'm concerned, either it's the correct play or it is the incorrect play. The amount of money that you're risking is inconsequential. And in fact, if it's going to be something that's going to cause you to not play properly, then you are playing at the wrong game. You're playing the wrong stakes, right? If you're playing poker, you need to drop down. If you are not capable of making those type of calls, then you are obviously playing at a level that is over your head as far as monetarily, and you need to drop down a level. Same thing here. You need to be playing at a price point here that's comfortable to you. If you put your last $10,000 into Survivor pools, well, that's going to change the way you think and what teams you wind up picking on a week in, week out basis, and you're not going to be willing to take some risk. And ultimately here in Survivor pools, you're going to have to take a risk. Obviously, we're taking a risk every week. There are teams, the risks that we take may be different depending on the week, right? So you had a Kansas City last week, which was a very heavy favorite. We've got Indianapolis, as we'll see this week, another heavy favorite, but there's no guarantee those teams are going to win. But when I say risk, I know you guys feel comfortable taking that 14-point favorite. I do as well. I assume they're going to win. They're going to win 90+% of the time. But what I'm talking about is you're down to very few people in your pool, Grandissimo being an example of that last week. If you knew that 13 of 15 people or 12 of 15 people were going to take Kansas City, the really smart play there is to go against Kansas City. But it's going to be difficult for people who put up a $100,000 entry to say, I just want to get to next week. All right. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. You've got to be willing to lose in order to win. All right. So let's take a look here what we've got going on for week number 8 in the NFL. We're going to head over to my spreadsheet first and bring that up. All right. We've got, as I mentioned, the Colts. Boy, the Colts are playing maybe some of the best football out of any team, certainly offensively, in the league, and they are a massive favorite here against what potentially is one of the worst, well, definitely one of the worst, if not the worst team in all of football. So we get a 91% win probability here for the Colts. As you can see, Survivor Grid, which will pop up in a second, has a 32%-ish pick percentage coming in on the Colts. So at 0% future weight, the spreadsheet always looks at the biggest favorites and just is going to say if there's, I'm going to speak a little bit more on what these, on what a lot of these columns mean, because I know I've been getting some questions. I got new viewers here who don't necessarily know. Unique teams is just, when I change this entry number, I built this spreadsheet not to do this show. It was just really for me to kind of help me out, because I play in a lot of pools where sometimes I do have over 100 entries in these pools, and it just gives me an idea of how many, at least the spreadsheet thinks I should be playing. So if I had 25, it would just change it and say, all right, you should be playing like 16 Colts, 9 Kansas City, if we didn't care about future weight. I leave it at 100 because 100 really makes it look like a percentage, right? So 63% to 37% that we're going to be on the Colts here and Kansas City. So speaking of Kansas City, 83% chance. This is the Monday night game, and we're expecting Jaden Daniels not to be in. So there's about an 83% chance here for Kansas City. There's another point that I really want to bring up when it comes to these pools, and you get down to, we're down to the end of your pool, or the nearing the end. Let's say you've got 10 people left in your pool. If it's close in the teams that you are considering taking, you want to try and take the tiebreakers. Should not be, well, I think this team is on the road or this team is at home. The tiebreaker should be, you want to take the latest game possible if you have the ability to hedge. I'm assuming, I'm under the assumption here that you may be able to put a bet in as a hedge. So why do we want to put the last game in possible for that? Well, we're going to have all this information, right? If you are the sole person in your pool who takes Kansas City this week, let's say there are 7 people left. You didn't take Kansas City last week. The rest of them did. Now you can feel really confident you're the only one on Kansas City, because obviously they can't. So if the rest of them, the 6 other ones, they could all take the Colts, and you go ahead and take Kansas City, Well, what does that do? That gives you the ability to now see what happened in the Colt game. If the Colts lose, you're now in a spot to win your entire pool, and you're sitting with the solo game. So now you can make an educated hedge on that game. If they were both playing at 1 o'clock, you could still hedge the game, but now your hedge amount is going to be different because you don't have as much information. We don't know if the Colts have won their game or not, and so we don't have that info in order to make that decision. So if it's close, we're not going to just take the late game just to take the late game, but if at all possible, I would just prefer taking the latest game possible to give me the ability to get more information on the market. The more information you have, the easier it is to put a number on how much you should be hedging. All right. So if you're going to win $10,000, if Kansas City just wins their game outright, you could put a nice hedge in. And I like to hedge on the spread because it gives me the opportunity to hit a middle. You could go either way. I have to bet more if I'm hedging the spread, right? Because that's more of a 50-50 bet. I would have to bet a higher amount than I would, let's say, if I was betting on the money line, because on the money line, I'm going to be getting whatever the money line is. Or let's bring up the spreadsheet again. And so the Kansas City game here, that's the midpoint minus 409. So let's just say I'm getting plus 400 on Washington, right? And I wanted my hedge to return $1,000, or let's say $1,000, right? I'd only have to bet $250 on that hedge if I took it on the money line. If I wanted a $1,000 hedge on the spread, and this spread was minus 8.5, well, then I would have to bet a full $1,000, probably $1,100 in order to win 1,000. But the advantage there is if Kansas City wins the game by less than 8.5 points, not only do I advance in the pool, and in this hypothetical, I'm going to win the pool right there, my 10,000, but I'm also going to collect an additional 1,000 on my bet. And if, of course, the Chiefs lose the game outright, depending on how the rules work in your pool, you may probably advance, which most pools will. If everyone gets eliminated in the same week, you advance. But double check your pool, because in that scenario, if you're all chopping and there's 10 of you, well, you now just risked $1,000 that you just chopped up and won because your team lost. So really important to pay attention to the rules. All right, so we've got Kansas City as a big favorite this week. Buffalo, not too far behind. We've got a kind of a clump of teams here in that 77 to 78% range of potentially a potential win probability, I should say. And actually, let me close this. Is going to confuse you. All I do in this column is just flip that to a positive number. So we've got all these teams around 77% chance to win. We'll see Atlanta here getting a fair number of people picking them, and Cincinnati as well. Well, why is that? If we move to 50% on future value, you see that even the Colts here remain the number one pick because they're such a massive favorite. And they do have some future value, which we'll see on Survivor Grid, but still not as much as a Kansas City or a Buffalo. And who knows, the way Indianapolis is playing, they may have more future value than we're really anticipating. But Cincinnati, very limited future value. As a matter of fact, this is probably the largest favorite they are going to be for the rest of the year, and we're going to see that. So obviously, as we get to 50% future value weight, where we're looking at more of a moderate size pool where we think it might get a full 18 weeks, but there's a potential there where if we get some massive upsets, it won't get to 18 weeks. So it's really a judgment call. If I was in a pool with at least 100 people, I'm starting to look at 50%. I mean, I'll show you what the 25% looks like just for yours, for your guidance, right? There's no real set way to do this. So 25%, we're looking at mostly Indianapolis and Kansas City. And you can see that number, typically that number, as we add the future value weight, usually the team that's a big favorite like Indianapolis is, this number will go down. The reason the number's going up, again, is because you look at these top teams here, they've got the least amount of future value outside of Atlanta. So, the least amount of future value. I said that right. So if we look at 50%, a little bit less, it's suggesting on Indianapolis, and it's putting a lot on Cincinnati. You see Atlanta as well pops up with their limited future value, and that's the three teams, go figure, that are getting the most attention. Excuse me. Let's head up to the Survivor Grid. We'll take a look at that and bring up the spreadsheet here for you, if it'll work. All right, we'll find Survivor Grid. Here we go. And let's just take a look. I mean, we've got Indianapolis. I mean, that's the first thing we need to look at. Do we have any other opportunities here for Indianapolis? Well, there's certainly not going to be a 2-touchdown favorite in any of these future weeks. At Pittsburgh, we're probably not going to want them. Home for Atlanta, tough matchup. They should be a favorite. At Kansas City, home for Houston. Houston, really, really good defense. That offense, is struggling. At Jacksonville, at Seattle, home for San Francisco, home for Jacksonville, at Houston. I mean, it's pretty obvious this is going to be the last big opportunity you have for the Colts. Now, you may have taken the Colts like I did with a couple of my picks last week. And so now you're in a situation where you cannot take the Colts. If you can take the Colts, obviously you have to give strong consideration here to Indianapolis. Mentioned Kansas City. A lot of people obviously took Kansas City last week. For those of you in Circa, Kansas City may be a team that you're saving. You see in Circa, not as many people took Kansas City because you have to pick a game on the holidays. Kansas City plays on the holidays. They get Dallas. Certainly not an easy game, but people are saving their holiday teams because they want to have options. So not as many people took them in Circa. Whereas you compare it to Grandissimo, where that's a smaller number of people left in the pool, and everyone just fired away at Kansas City because they're not as worried about the future value. They want to be able to just advance. So they're taking the safer picks, which is what I advise you guys to do, except when you have a chance at a good fade. And the threshold column on my spreadsheet is going to tell you that. But let's look at Kansas City the rest of the season here. At Buffalo, at Denver, not very good. Indianapolis, at home. I don't even know if this is going to be a 5-point spread right now. That's shaping up right now, if they played this week, to be a really, really good game, with both of those teams looking to be the best teams in the AFC right now. At Dallas, home for Houston, potentially a play there. Of course, you got the Chargers, and then at Tennessee, which they will be a massive favorite in Week 16. Depending on the size of your pool, are we even going to get to a Week 16, right? So Kansas City not going to be very popular. Philly gets this Giant team that knocked them off 2 weeks ago. They get them at home. Pretty much the same spread it was 2 weeks ago. Giants playing better. Should have won that game last week. Philly has not outgained an opponent yet this year. So while they have been winning, they have not looked great. So that's why what would have been a 4-point differential, you get about 2 points home field advantage. So the Giants were like a 7.5-point favorite. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. You would assume Philly would then turn around and be an 11.5-point favorite. But the fact that the Giants beat them, Philly, like I said, has not looked great. Giants have looked better. They've actually said, you know what? We were 4 points off on that spread 2 weeks ago, and now that line has changed to 7. But you've got them at Green Bay's not great. Detroit, at Dallas, home for Chicago, maybe. At the Chargers, home for Vegas for sure would be a good play. At Washington, at Buffalo, and home for Washington. And Week 18, by the way, really tough to start projecting what's going to happen in Week 18. Teams clinch and don't play their starters. So a team like Philly, where you thought, I was saving Philly for Washington, or even better, Buffalo, I was saving Buffalo for the Jets in Week 18. And then it turns out Josh Allen doesn't play, James Cook doesn't play, so on and so forth, and they're no longer a 2-touchdown favorite in that game. They're wind up getting points in that game, and you wasted saving them. So be careful waiting for a team for Week 18. We just don't know what their situation is going to be going into Week 18. They may have clinched their playoff spot and really not playing any of their players. All right, so we got Buffalo this week at Carolina. Looks like a good spot. They're at Miami. Miami's been terrible in Week 10. This is an important week. Let's go over it now. Week 10. Mentioned to a lot of you last week where I said, the good pivot last week off of Kansas City was Denver, because very few people were taking Denver. Why? Because a lot of them were holding Denver for Week 10. Now, that almost backfired, but it's still a smart play. If you looked at your pool, of course, you needed the Kansas City upset to make it work. Once Kansas City wins, now you're in there going, well, my advantage of taking Denver is gone, and then Denver's losing that game, and you're really kicking yourself. But you've got to play at least, there's no right way to play, but if you had sound strategy and you had good reasoning behind your pick, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And of course, when you're sitting there with Denver and now you've lost all that leverage because Kansas City won, it's a bad feeling. So you feel good that they won, but I did suggest that be the team and not New England because so many other people were taking New England. If you were going to make that kind of a move, let's take a move to a team that not a lot of people are taking. In that case, Denver was the team. But I also told you, be careful. If you've used Buffalo already, you're not going to have a really good option here in Week 10. Chicago plays the Giants. Not great. Seattle and Arizona. I mean, Seattle is starting to look like one of the better teams. Also, I think they'll be a bigger favorite here than the 4-point indicates. So, but a few of you may have taken Seattle as well already. Detroit at Washington. Indy home for Atlanta. Not great. Baltimore at Minnesota. Not great. Tampa and New England, not a good pick. So there's not really great options here in Week 10. So really be careful here in Week 10, especially if you've taken Denver and you're considering Buffalo this week. So that's also another reason people have taken Buffalo already, and also people are going to hold off on Buffalo if they have not, because we've got so many options here this week. Philly getting a little bit of attention. We went through them. New England, so a lot of people took them last week. They get Cleveland here this week. Those who didn't take them last week are looking at potentially taking New England. They do have the Jets coming up in Week 11. Let's just look at what the rest of Week 11 looks like. Baltimore at Cleveland. Green Bay is at the Giants. New England home for the Jets. I mean, when you look at this right now, I mean, the Cleveland defense, look, Baltimore with Lamar back certainly will be a large favorite, but I know a lot of people are not going to want to take that game. Green Bay at the Giants is not a cakewalk. Green Bay has not looked great despite the record. So that New England home game against the Jets might be the best game that week. Houston at Tennessee. Houston hasn't looked that great. Atlanta home for Carolina. Carolina's playing better. So I think a lot of people are going to want to, if they have New England in saved, that's going to be a week at home against the Jets. They're going to be a much bigger than a 7-point favorite in that game. All right. So let's look at some of the teams here that are getting a little bit more attention. Atlanta being one of them. They're home for Miami this week. Miami in shambles. A lot of people, because of the future value, go back to the spreadsheet and you recall not a ton of future value, but there are weeks here we could take them. Week 11 against Carolina at home, right? You just talked about Week 11. The New England game, probably a better game, but you do have an option here with Carolina going into Atlanta. At New Orleans, we don't love it. At the Jets, okay. I mean, there'll be a decent-sized favorite there, most likely, the way the Jets have been playing, but, road game. Home against Miami, Week 18. We just said, I'm sorry, that's Atlanta, but home against New Orleans in Week 18. And like I just said, we don't know what our situation is going to be for Week 18. So I really don't even want to look at Week 18 as a potential play. So while the future value for Atlanta looks better than, let's say, Cincinnati, this could be the last time you take Atlanta as well. So you have to take that into consideration. You might want to get on Atlanta in your pool. Let's go down to Cincinnati, where a lot of people are taking them. I mentioned probably the best opportunity you'll have to take Cincinnati all year. I don't think there's a question about it. Home for the Jets. Next week, home for Chicago, at Pittsburgh, home for New England, at Baltimore, at Buffalo, then home for Baltimore, at Miami, and home for Arizona. Again, Week 18, that Cleveland game, we don't know. Most likely both of well, you never know. Cincinnati at this point is they're still they're the third choice now to win that division. I think with Lamar back, it's going to be very difficult for them to make it into the playoffs. They have not played Baltimore yet, so they're going to hopefully, for Baltimore's sake, they're going to get Lamar in both of those games. So I think it'll be a tough road for Cincinnati to make the playoffs. So the odds are good. Both Cincinnati and Cleveland will not be in the playoffs, but do we really want that game anyway? Cincinnati hosting Cleveland. So this is probably going to be the best opportunity to take the Jets. Again, if you're in a much larger size pool, you're going to get 18 weeks. Then Cincinnati has to become a much stronger consideration. If you can get by with Cincinnati, kind of a free square, we don't have to worry about them the rest of the year. Huge advantage, right? Tampa's the next team that's getting some attention, 10%. Don't necessarily love it. At New Orleans here, they are -4. We'll look at, 66%. I forget what the percentage is on my spreadsheet, but they're home for New England. We don't love that. At Buffalo, at the Rams. Home for Arizona. Could be a decent game, decent spot in Week 13. Home for New Orleans. That's probably a better spot, and that's Week 14. How far out do we really want to look? Buffalo, more than likely. You'd have used Buffalo already. Green Bay, there's a chance here. The Carolina game, you're probably going to having had used them. Detroit, There's going to be opportunities here along the way before we get to the Dallas game in week 14, Kansas City in that Houston game. So while Tampa, this may not be a favorite game at home for New Orleans, certainly better than being at New Orleans, right? We'd much rather them at home in week 14. It's a long way out into the future, but that's what we're looking at for some of these teams here that are getting the most attention, and really no one else is getting that. All right, let's get back to the spreadsheet just so we can look at what the 100% is letting us know. Let me bring that up for you. All right, at 100%, doesn't really change much, right? It's just a unique situation that we've got such a massive favorite here with the Colts, and they're limited in their future value. Now, we went through that. There are some games, obviously, that we have some interest on Indianapolis, but the Cincinnati, there's just no chance that we're going to be taking them again, and that's why there's a focus here. So I think in larger pools, you certainly have to make a strong consideration on Cincinnati as an option just to get them out of the way so that you can you'd have more options here in the future. I added a column here to the spreadsheet quickly. I just want to show you guys. And if you noticed, every time I change if I change these numbers, this changes. This is just a simulation. And I wanted to just show you guys that this is based on these percentages. And I know you guys don't look at it in the same way I do necessarily, where I really just look at these things as a percentage. Picture in your mind, you've got how many games we've got this week. You've got, 12 games, 13 games, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, so 13 games. We've got 13 bags. Each bag's filled with 100 marbles, right? There's white marbles and black marbles. The white marbles are going to be wins for the favorite. The black marble is going to be a win for the underdog. So in our bag for Indianapolis, we're going to have 90 balls in there that are white because those are the ones where Indianapolis is going to win. They have a 90% chance to win. We'll have 10 balls in there that are black. All right, if you want to round up, we've got, let's say, 91 balls where they win or white. But you get the point. And we'll do that with each and every one of these teams. That's essentially what I'm doing here in that AN column with the WWW that you see right now, loss. I just did a randomization, and based on this probability is based on the win probability is the probability that this is a W or a loss. So you can see every time we change it, here you go. This was a very every favorite one, except for someone who took Philly, you got knocked out. Let's change. Anytime you change the number in here, it's going to change. Here we go. The top favorites all won, and New England gets knocked off. We lose 6.5% of people in the pools, and all these teams that were close, we lose 10% on Tampa. This is literally how it works. If you want to create a if you are good at programming, you could do a Monte Carlo simulation, and that'll really show you. You run it 10,000 times. That's going to show you what your pool is going to look like in a simulation based on what the pick percentages are. And of course, we're guessing at the pick percentages here, but I just wanted to show you. It's, we're going to get, here you go. I mean, we lose 3, if not 4, of the 70+% teams win, right? So we get a chaotic week. We're going to get a 24% team lose, a nearly 17% team lose, and there we go. We've got over 40% of our pool knocked out. Throw in another 5% here with Buffalo and Philly, right? And the top 2 teams advance, and you guys are kicking yourselves because you got off of Indianapolis. I mean, that's just the way it works. I just wanted to show you that all this is statistics. It's numbers. It's not necessarily what happens on the field. We enjoy what happens on the field. We do this because we are excited about watching these games on a Sunday, and you watch that Denver game and you had Denver in your pool, and it gives you a really big rush when they go ahead and win that game, and you feel relieved, and now you can't wait to make your picks for Wednesday, and then you can't wait for Sunday or maybe Monday night for your game to go off. And that's why we do it. It's for the fun of it. Of course, we're trying to win this money, but I want to show you just how easily, I mean, this is based on the probabilities, and I've proven to you guys before that the probabilities are accurate when it comes to the win probabilities here of these teams winning. Here, Kansas City loses. This is one of the 17 of 100 times Kansas City is going to lose. All right, so you pivoted off. You took Kansas City. You're in a pool with 7 people left. Almost all of them take Indianapolis. You say, well, I'm going to be smart here. I'm going to take Kansas City. And if Indianapolis loses and KC wins, I take the pool outright, and then you lost. Well, it wasn't a wrong play. You made the absolute right play. Let's look at why, by the way, threshold column quickly. This threshold column, a lot of you are unfamiliar with what this column is. Based on this pick percentage of 31.9%, this, if you are in a small, this is really for small pools. Small pools, meaning there's not that many people left in your pool. If you've got 10 people left in your pool and you think 3 people are going to take the Colts, well, you're going to need a team of at least 87% win probability in order to want to fade Indianapolis. And there are none of those teams here, so you'd be better off just jumping on Indianapolis. But what if we move this up to 50%? Right? You've got 10 people in your pool. Half of them are going to take the Colts. Well, now we're down to 82.3%, in which case that's really close, 82.9%, really close to Kansas City. But now you are at an advantage here by getting off of them and taking a Kansas City, but a Kansas City only. In your pool, let's say 75% are going to take, we'll make it, if it's 10, we'll make it an even number. Let's take it 70. 7 out of your 10 you think are going to be taking the Colts. Well, now you should be looking at any of these teams, right? Because the higher this percentage becomes, I went over it last week, the higher the pick percentage on a particular team, the more incentive you have to take a risk. All right. We saw in Circa a few years ago, I believe it was on the Thanksgiving games, and I believe the person won his pool by doing this. He basically knew that there was a small amount of people left in the pool. It was easy to tell because you've got a limited amount of games. He knew everyone was going to be taking one side of one team, and then he went and just took the other team. Now, a lot of people don't have the guts to really do something like that. But in that example, if you have a team that has a 75% chance to win, he gave himself basically a 25% chance to win. Now, you've got to be confident that everyone's going to be on there. If one other person does what you're doing, it defeats the entire thing, right? So if someone else says, I'm going to be kind of slick here and I'm going to go against the team that everybody else is taking, now you're at a disadvantage. So you have to be confident in it. At the end of the day, you have to gamble. We've got to take risks. Goes back to my original point. You've got to take some risks. We're playing a game of where we just don't have full information. So you've got to take some educated guesses. That's what I'm here to help you guys doing. And also check out my Twitter account. Or my X account. I never really mentioned it on here, but at StatSational on X. And that's going to, when we have updates, if injuries or anything like that, where I'm not going to necessarily make a video, I try to post stuff over on X to maybe help you guys out and give you all the information you need to hopefully win your pool. All right, we've gone well over where I wanted to go here today, but I think we got some valuable information out there. If you like this video, definitely do us a favor, hit the like, hit the subscribe. We do appreciate that. And hopefully you guys will be back with me next week for a little bit more Scratchin' and Survivin'. Good luck, everybody. See you next week.